Okay, to start with, I have the original here that I did. Now this was part of a book, Painted Creations, which is now out of print. So I've turned it into a pattern packet. And for those of you that aren't sure what a pattern packet is, you get color photos, usually you get step-by-steps, and then you also get complete instructions as well as the pattern. And that's available both as a download as well as a printed packet. Okay, so the I Believe in Santa, this wood piece I got from Bear With Us Inc. And they have all kinds of really fun wood pieces and ornaments. This one has the scrolls both top and bottom, but you can also get it without the scroll on the bottom, which is another fun way to paint it. So that's what I'm going to show you today. We'll put this aside. Now to begin with, this is raw wood. So you could seal it with a wood sealer or the DecoArt chalky paint or the stain blocker. But most often I'm able to just go ahead and put a couple coats of the paint on. Now the paint that I'm using is the DecoArt Traditions. This is the medium white that I'm going to base coat and seal the wood with. You could use Cool Neutral in Americana or bleach sand. What I want to do is I want to get a nice light color here. I'm going to start with my DecoArt Full Squirrel. I love the flat brush in the Full Squirrel for base coating, so just plump that up. And I just want to give it a nice thick coat all over. And if I put on a heavy coat, I can get by with just one. And so I want to get that covered in really, really well. Okay, so I have a nice coat of paint on here. I'm going to clean my brush in water and set that aside. And this lighter color is going to help our bright, transparent colors that I'm going to be using in the background. It's going to help them show up better. I know that the background is a deep blue, but that blue is a little on the transparent side, so this is going to make it show up much better. The next thing I got to do is I've got to blow dry it. Okay, now what this has done is it raises the grain a little bit. So to take care of that, I'm going to use a little sanding pad just to make it smooth. You can feel how smooth it gets. All right. And I've got it coated good enough that I do not need a second coat on mine. If you were skimpy, then put a second coat on and blow dry it one more time. The next step is to go ahead and transfer the pattern. Now, really the best thing when you transfer the pattern is to trace it onto some see-through tracing paper, because if you move or wiggle, you're going to be able to replace it back into the right position and be able to transfer your design better. But I am just going to go ahead and use it like this and take my chances. Okay, so I'm going to place this on the wood. Okay, and I am going to tape it down so that it doesn't wiggle on me. And I'm going to use some graphite paper. It's like an artist carbon paper. And I'll use the gray because that's going to show up the best on this. It also comes in different colors. I basically only use the gray and the white. Now, because I'm going to be painting the background, I'm not going to do the lettering at this time, but I am going to do the hat because I'm going to just try to avoid the hat a little bit and the bell so that I don't have to rebase coat those again. I can certainly touch them up if I need to, but I'm not going to coat that all with blue and then have to rebase coat that in with white. Just going to use, and I'm using a stylus. I like a stylus rather than a pencil because I can get a smaller outline. But use what you have. Don't need to do the crisscross because this gets base coated. The hat gets base coated, so I'm not going to do those wiggly lines. If you need to do a few of the center areas of the fur, you can, but it's not necessary as long as you follow the direction. I'll take a peek. I'm not going to do the lettering, and that's really all I can transfer on at this time. Take off my pattern. All right, now I'm going to use the Traditions Phthalo Blue. Now I do have a conversion chart on my website for Americana and Tradition colors, so you have some options there. I just like the bright intensity that I get with the Tradition colors. So I'm going to be using Phthalo Blue, and I also have some Aquamarine. And here's a little tip. This is a brand new one. Rather than unscrewing the cover and taking the paper that's sealed inside, I take the stylus and I just poke a little hole in through the paper. That way I don't squeeze out as big a gobs. I can get a smaller amount and then close it up. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start with the Phthalo Blue. Oh, and you know what? It's a good idea to go ahead and put some tape across where the scrolls are so I don't get this blue into there, because that's going to be a pretty metallic gold later. That'll just keep me from messing into that area. Okay, so now I've got my 1/2 inch black gold angle brush, and that's what I'm going to use to put the Phthalo Blue on. Now if it's a brand new brush, it has like a sizing in it, so you'll want to rinse it in water, blot it off on your paper towel. Okay, but this one I've used a while. So now when I put this on, I'm not trying to get it smooth. I'm going to think of the letter X and crisscross these brush strokes. I want to be able to see the texture. I'm going to add a touch of water into it, just loosen it up a little bit. Now I am going to be a little more careful when I get close to the hat, and then I'll slap it from there. And I can actually use the chisel edge to get closer. But think of the letter X and slap the entire background. Okay, so I have Phthalo Blue all over the background. Now I'm not going to clean my brush. I'm going to get some more water in it and just kind of pat it on the palette. And now I'm going to get some of the Aquamarine, and I'm going to crisscross some of that in the background as well. So I've got a very mottled look. I'm not worried about ridges. I mean, if it's a really huge ridge, that's one thing, but these are a little bit softer. Let's see if I can tip that a little better so that you can see how pretty that little mottled background looks. Add more water if it's not kind of blending for you. I'm not trying to perfectly blend it. If I get too much, I can always come back and put some of the, pick up some of the blue, the Phthalo Blue, or just use a little water to soften it. I could have used extender blending medium too, but I want this to dry quickly, and this is not an important stage that I need to worry about blending too much. So just want to get some different colors in the background, because I'm going to do like kind of a sunspot background with little circles and shiny areas, and that should be good enough. So there we have. Okay, and now I want to dry that again. Okay, that should be pretty good. Now the fun part. I am going to make all different kinds of pretty little background circles. So let's take a closer look here. I've got aquamarine, I've got purples, I've got quinacridone violet, and I can put a little touch of white in some of them to lighten them up and play around. I want to try to keep this top corner a little bit fancier or a little bit more detailed. So I'm going to do more in that area, not quite as much underneath where the lettering is. Okay, but let me show you what I'm going to do for that. Now we get to use some fun brushes. This is the black gold fountain brush, and it is like, let's see if you can see that, it's like it has a little hole in the middle here, and it's going to spread out, and I'm going to show you how to do circles. Now I've got two different sizes. I've got a number 4 and a number 6, so that I'll get different sized little circles or sunspots. Okay, so let's, since I already have the aquamarine out, let's start with that. I am going to go ahead and get my angle brush rinsed out a little better there, set that aside. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and wet it because I think I want just a little bit more moist with this brush. So wet it, you know, blot it on your towel, get a little bit. Now, when you squish this all the way down and you press hard on the, all the way down to the ferrule, press hard, twist it in a circle, and you can get circles. Okay, now, do a little bit less, and you can get smaller circles. Okay, so I want loose paint. I don't want it real thick, so I'm thinned it with a little bit of water here. Okay, and I'm just going to go to town, handle straight up in the air, and going to just start twisting and adding circles. They can be all different sizes, all throughout my background. And every time you do it, it's going to be slightly different. So I'm going to do some with the bigger one, and I'll come back do some smaller ones after. This is a great stippling brush also, so it makes really fine, delicate snow and a different type of fur, trees and bushes. Great brush. And it's so fun, it's hard to know when to quit. I think I'll leave it at that. All right, rinse the brush. Rinsing in water. Okay, then I'm going to just start doing some other colors. So I've got quinacridone violet is a pretty color, and so I'm going to put some of that. I'll probably need a little bit of white. Now, I've got a few older jars of the Traditions, but they do come in the tubes now. So it just is nice. Let's see, and I want to get some purple. Let's see where there's my purple. You know, my purple looks so dark, I thought it was black. Dioxazine purple, it's a beautiful shade of purple. I want to get a little bit of that in there too. And you don't need much of that. Okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch to my smaller one now, my smaller fountain brush. Okay, I'm going to rinse it in water, kind of blot it off. And let's see, I'm going to do some of the quinacridone violet. So I'll fill that up, but then I'm going to press it down on the, I want to twist that so that I'm really spreading those bristles out. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and just start adding some of those. And there again, it's hard to know when to quit. I really like making these spotted backgrounds. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and make, I think, some purple ones. Let's do some of the dark purple. Okay, now I'm not going to clean the brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the white and do some lavender, and I need just a touch more water in there. There again. All right. I'm going to rinse it. I want to get a few lighter blue ones yet too. So you could use the aquamarine, you could add white to your phthalo blue, totally up to you. I just want a variety of colors. So I'm going to use, I think, the aquamarine. I added a little water, lighten it up with some white. And I think I'll just go ahead and leave it at that. Looks good to me. Okay, then I want to do some little sparkle lines coming out, like little stars that are glowing. I want to keep in mind that I'm going to be having some lettering up here, so the sparkle that goes in the top corner, really kind of push it up more there. If you want to wait till after you get your letters transferred on, you certainly could. Okay, this time I'm going to be adding some extender blending medium into my paint. Now, the extender blending medium is Traditions, and I use it with both Americana as well as the Tradition colors. And what this does is it allows your paint to stay wet longer so you have more time to blend. I've got my Jillybean Dirty Dancer brush, and I'm going to be using this on other areas of the design as well. Now what this does is it has a small pointed round on one side and a dry brush blender on the other, but I actually use it wet. So I'm going to put both ends, and I've poured some extender in this little cup. I'm going to put both ends in the extender, but really wipe it all off on the paper towel, especially that blender side. Now the long pointy round is what I use to put color on with. So my brush has that in it, so I'm loosening up that white. Okay, I'm going to start, let's put one right about here. Okay, so if I start with a dot, give myself a little dot where the center of it's going to be. And if it's easier to use a liner, you sure could, but I'm going to pull lines top and bottom, side to side, and then one more in the middle, and they don't all have to be the same length. Doesn't have to be uniform. Okay, now because it's wet, I can take the blender side and just gently drag that tip out so it fades into your background. So it softens just where I left off on each of those lines, gives it a nice little sparkle. Kind of blends into the background for you. So let's get a few more of those. Okay, so I've got my sparkle lines. Now I'm going to take my stylus and I am going to go ahead and dip the tip of it into the white and add a little bit nicer dot in the center of each of my sparkles. Okay, now later I'm also going to be adding some metallic gold dots and stars. I can show you a few of them up in this corner, but the rest I'm going to wait so I don't get my hand in it. So to begin with, let's use some of the, there it is. This is the DecoArt Extreme Sheen and the 24 karat gold. It really is nice and thick and bold color. So let's get a little bit of that out. Now you can use the end of your stylus. If you want little stars, you could use the end of a brush if you want bigger stars. I'm going to dip it in my metallic gold. Let's get that closer. So I'm going to dip it in the metallic gold and then I'm going to set it down so that little dot is going to be the middle of my star. And then I want you to think about a gingerbread man. I'm going to go up for the head, side to side for the arms, and down for the legs. And sometimes I have to reload, you know, and pull back in those areas again, but that's how you can just add little stars throughout your design. And then go ahead and just dot some metallic gold little dots throughout the background as well. The background of the hat I did in a burgundy color that unfortunately is no longer available, so now I have to mix it. So I am using the Naphthol Red Light. I'm going to use a little bit of quinacridone violet and I think a little purple maybe, or I could use purple. I have so many options to make a burgundy. And I'm just going to brush mix. So the Naphthol Red Light, I can add a touch of, let's try a touch of the purple. It doesn't take much. I just want a deep, deeper red. Actually, that's really pretty. And you'll have a exact instructions in your pattern packet. So just kind of a dark burgundy. If you want to brighten it up a little bit, let's even put just a little bit of quinacridone violet in there. You just have to like the color. I just want a deep dark type of red. Okay. Now I'm going to use that to go ahead and fill in the hat. Get that based in. Okay, so the hat is based in. I may only need one coat. It depends on how heavy you put it on. If as it dries it gets transparent, I will do one more coat. In the meantime, I'm just going to go ahead and clean up my bell a little bit. And remember, we use the medium white to base that in. So I'll just go back and get a little bit of that. Just use my round brush side. Just want to clean up those edges because the yellow that we use for the bell is very transparent. And so any blue that I got into that bell, I just want to go ahead and clean up right now. Give that a chance to dry. Let's take out a little dark gray. There again, this is a new one, so I'm going to go ahead and just poke that paper with the stylus. That way not as much comes out. Okay, this time for the fur, I am going to use the Dynasty Black Silver Rake Brush. And it's got real fine little hairs, but it's stiffer, so it really works well for fur. So the hairs are all different lengths. If you can probably kind of see that the tips look a little more transparent because there's fewer hairs on the tips, which give you that nice fur. Okay, I am going to thin it with just a touch of water. So I've got the dark gray. All right, thin it with a little water. You want it loose. You want it to be able to come off the brush nice. Okay. Now follow the direction that the fur is on your pattern. And I start with the outside. Now I want to just barely use the tips and just drag. This is just the undercoat, but I want it to come off beyond the edge of where I have that base coated so that it's going to blend better. Now I do rows. Instead of doing all the way around the edges, once I get this edge, I come across with a row. Keep coming across with rows. And let it be a little bit choppy. Don't just fill it in. It's okay to see some of that background showing through. And you can tip your brush a little bit more sideways. If I pull, here, let me show you right here. If I pull straight, I'm going to get wider. If I turn it a little to the side, I can get more narrow. Okay, so a lot of times I'm using it a little bit more to the side. So let's get all the fur in. Okay, once I get over to this side, I'm gonna flip it and pull it almost in a circle because it's gonna stick out the outside edge over there. Okay, for the bell, I want to base coat that in with some Indian yellow. Love this color. It's more of an orangey yellow, so if you're having to make substitutions, that's okay. Just take some yellow, put a little touch of orange in it, and you'll come close. I'm going to take some of that, and I'm going to take the medium white, and I'm going to mix those two together equal parts in order to fill in my little bell. So I like to brush mix. You certainly could use, you know, a palette knife or something, but scoop that up. You just want a nice, pretty yellow. Makes it a little bit more of a golden color. And fill in that bell. Okay, so the bell is good. Now, I'm just going to let that dry on its own, but my hat is dry. I'm actually ready to go back and start doing the highlights in the hat. And for the highlights, I'm going to use the Naphthol Red Light, which is the color that I mixed to get my burgundy shade. But it's a beautiful color for highlights. And I'm going to be using my larger Dirty Dancer this time because I have bigger areas that I want to blend. So I'm going to use the extender, both ends of the brush. Now, depending on the area that you live in, sometimes you have to moisten the whole hat when you're working, and sometimes you can just put it into your color. So you have to kind of play around with it a little bit to see if you've got enough. I'm going to go ahead and just put it in my color and see if that'll be enough. So just a little dab. I don't want it to overtake or to make it transparent. I just want it to loosen a little bit, and it gives me more time for blending. So both ends were dipped in extender. I really go in a circle with the blender brush, and that's also how I clean it after too. Okay, now for your highlights, down here in the tail, I'm going to start here. Now I'm not going to go on the edge. I'm going to make like a kind of like a V shape. Pull it up. I want it filled in, kind of solid, and then I'm going to flip over and just soften the outer edges. So I want lots of paint. Put it exactly where I want to make my folds. Flip the brush over and just barely catch that outside edge. Now I'll be picking up color and wiping it off, so just barely catch that outside edge, soften it in. Those of you that don't like to do the technique where you float color, this is another alternative to do this. I try not to go into the middle of my bright color because I don't want to lose that. If I brush in the middle of that color, it'll be taking it away. If I do that, I go back, put some more on right away, and just try again. So I've got just kind of a nice soft blend for that little V shape. Okay, so let's keep going here. I'm going to pull in a bump from the other side, and I'm going to soften that. Now normally I would recommend that you turn your piece so that your brush can always point towards the edge. Sometimes you'll see me doing it upside down, but it is awkward, but I do that for the sake of the camera. And I'm not pushing down hard, I'm just barely tickling to smooth or take away that hard edge. I just want to soften that edge. I keep reloading my brush. And let's pull in another one here. And you know, it's kind of nice to give it like a little hook sometimes. You'll get a little bit different fold that way. Okay, flip the brush over and soften. Okay, so I think that's good enough for my first highlight stage. If I made a mistake, I can always go back. I can rinse my brush in water, wipe it off on the towel, but put it back in the extender again and wipe it off on the towel, and I could go back with some of my burgundy. So I do wash my brush in water in between, but I always dress it again with the extender. So let's say I needed to fix up, you know, in between the folds, I could go ahead and put some burgundy back in, and there again, just soften the edges. Okay, so there's always a little way to fix it. You can go back and forth and it blends really nice. Okay, now I want to get some darker shadows. And I'm going to actually use the purple. There's lots of choices that you could use. So I cleaned my brush, re-put extender in it. Also clean your blender brush. Now I can clean it with just extender, but I want to make sure that I'm getting that other color out of there. Rub it good on the paper towel. Okay, so let's get some of that dioxazine purple. And it's a strong color, so you don't need a whole lot. Okay, and we'll see if I need more extender, but it's kind of a touchy-feely type of thing. I want to get a little bit of a hook going where the tail of the hat flips over. So somewhere in here, I'm going to get some purple to help separate the tail of the hat from the main part. Flip the brush over and just soften. I'm not dragging the color out. I want it to stay right where I put it to begin with. Now, I can leave the one side a harder line because of the tail of the hat. I'm going to pick little areas like here on the edge of the hat. I'm not going to pull all the way down in there, but I want to make a little bit of the purple and pull a little point down and soften both sides so that it dips a little further in the indent area there. Let's get a little more paint, just I got too much. Let me rinse my brush, start over. Okay, extender in the brush, wipe it on the paper towel, get some of that purple, and just kind of mix it up with what extender was on the brush. All right, I'm going to create some more shadow areas. So here's a edge here, and pull in just a thin little point. Make sure that you can see that, okay? And then just carefully soften that edge. Okay, now it can have texture. It's, you know, a fur hat, so it doesn't have to be as smooth as what you would maybe want to have for a satin ribbon. Okay, so let's see, where else do I want? I want to get maybe up in this top area here. So I'm kind of pulling irregular triangles to create these shadows. Barely touching. You got to have a soft touch, and only catching that outside edge. And just experiment. You're going to find whether a sweeping motion works better for you, or just a gentle little tap, 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 but not stipple. Don't pounce. Okay, and maybe just a little bit above that fur, just in that center area there a little bit, just to break up. Now, once you get this in, you can take a look and decide if you need one more coat on your highlights. Sometimes you do. But I'm also going to add some Paragon Orange in there to brighten up the center of those highlights. So that's okay. All right, now I'm going to get my orange. And I'm really kind of plumping that brush up. And now I'm going to get the center of my highlight areas. And barely touch, because you don't want to disturb what's underneath. Make all those centers pop one more time. And there we have all of our highlights. Now, once it dries, you'll be able to see if you need to do any more touch-ups, but I'm going to leave it as is. Makes it nice and puffy. Okay, let's go to the fur next. Okay, now I was going to show you also another option for fur is the wave brushes, and these are available both in the faux squirrel as well as the black gold. And it's like someone has taken a little pinking shears and chopped off the tips. So that's another option for making fur. Now this will have a little bit thicker line, so a lot of times I'll use this in the beginning, and then the final hairs do with the rake brush because they will be a little bit thinner. But it's nice to have a variety of hair within the fur. Just going to be using water now. And thin the paint just a little bit. And there again, you've got to experiment a little bit because you want it to come off the brush, but you don't want it transparent. Okay. When I get up on the tips with this, if I drag the tips, I get thin lines. If I push down, it's going to get filled in. So you got to just learn to drag the tips. And there again, if you tip it a little bit sideways, you can get smaller fur sections. So let's give it a try. Now I'm going to go right back on top of what I did. And this is the medium white that I'm using. And remember to do rows. Okay, now you can tell that you can still see some of that gray showing through. You don't want it to be solid. You want to be able to have, you know, see a little bit of all the colors when you get done. Okay, rinse that brush in water. Then I'm going to go to my brightest white for the next stage. And I am going to go back to my rake brush and use some titanium white. Now, I got to tell you, when you do use the tradition colors, there's a few colors I just can't live without, even though I like both traditions and Americana, and I'll kind of flip-flop and use the same ones within the same design even, but you get such a nice coverage with this one, so. Okay, so thin it with a little bit of water. Okay, not much. Not probably as thin as I did the first time with the gray. So I'm thickening it up just a bit. I was a little too thin with it to begin with. Okay, now I want to get very light, delicate hairs coming out. And I can almost think a little bit more of clumps. Now, I was pulling from the inside out, but actually for this step it's better to pull from the tips in because you're going to have a different looking fur that way. So reverse, pull from the outside in and make kind of clumps going across, just like you kind of see in your pattern. Don't even, I'm not even trying to exactly hit the same brush marks from the other colors. Want it to be a little more clumpy. If I fill it in solid, it's not going to have dimension anymore. So let's get our white. Okay, now I got the white on there. And you see how you can still see lots of the other colors in between there. I want this to dry just a little bit, but I'm going to see if I can go ahead and get just the tips. When you look at the original here, let's see if I can get out of the shine, it's a little bit darker on the extreme edges, and then I'm going to put just a touch more white in the dead center of the fur to help bump that up a little bit, give it a little bit more depth. Okay, now what am I going to use? I could use Payne's Gray in Americana, which is a very pretty color. I can use, I could try the darker gray, I could try the blue. Oh, and also, if you were to get that too solid, go ahead and go back and add some more of your gray or to break it up, and then add the white back in again. So I'm going to use the black, but I'm going to use it in a wash. Now, a wash means hardly any paint. It's just like, I just want it to be more like dirty water. And that brush was not clean, so let me get rid of some of that. Okay, so just like dirty water almost, and just carefully, I'm just going to brush that over the tips so that I can help set that edge back down into the shadow area a little bit better. Maybe a touch more paint in that. And if you want, you can almost do like little choppy strokes so that you're not getting, and I've only got the color on the one tip. I don't want to get like a hard line going across there. And do the same thing on this side, just kind of chopping with the chisel edge of your angle brush, just kind of chopping that in. And that'll help, you know, and there too, if you found that you got too big of a clump somewhere, you could kind of chop in with this to help separate it. Okay, but I like that. I'm going to leave that alone. So one more step is just to put a little bit brighter white just in the dead center. This time, if my paint is nice and creamy, I don't even need to add water this time. And I want to pull from the tips in and get a brighter white and just get some clumps in the middle there. Don't want to go to the very top or bottom edge because it'll look like those are rounded a little better if I stay just in the middle. Okay, and I think I'm going to leave it alone. All right. It's always fun to tint it with other colors too, so if you wanted to put little washes of other colors in there, you certainly could. Next, we're ready for our bell. Okay, so for the bell, now we're going to do some highlights. And I'm going to go back to my Dirty Dancer, and I'm going to use my small one. I'm going to use it with extender. Now the reason I have the Dirty Dancers made, the Jillybean Dirty Dancer made, is because I was laying the color down with one brush, then I'd hurry up, put it in my mouth, and take my blender brush and try to blend it. So this way I can just flip it back and forth, which is just nicer. Okay, so to highlight it, I'm going to actually use some Indian yellow and titanium white this time. Okay, and just a little dab of extender in there. And I'm going to put that in the highlight colors, or in the highlight areas. So I want it like in the center of the bell down here. Nice and solid in that middle area. And then flip the brush and just barely catch that outside edge. Not going to go and scrub in that middle of that paint color. All right, and then I'm going to do up on the top as well, right in the middle. And then soften that. Just soften, barely catch that edge and soften. And across the top of the rim. So I'm going to pull all the way across the top. Nice and solid. And this time I'm only going to catch the bottom edge. Okay, and then it all gets highlighted one more time in those same areas with titanium white, so it really pops forward. So I've got extender in the brush. I want to make sure that my blender brush is clean. Okay, so in the middle of the previous ones. Now if you're afraid of this stage, go ahead and blow dry it first. You've got to have a very delicate touch so that you don't remove what's underneath. And you certainly could blow dry it in between colors or steps. Okay, rinse my brush in water, but then I'll redress it in extender again. Okay, now I'm going to shade it. So I want to get both sides of the brush in the extender, wipe it off on the towel. And for shading, I'm going to use a color called Yellow Deep. It's a little brighter than what a raw sienna would be. So I like that it has lots of color. Okay, and I'm going to use that to add my shadow areas. And this is a nice transparent color, so it works to your advantage when you're shading. Okay, so I'm going to put some on the edge and bring it in a little fatter above the rim of the bell. Okay, now I need to flip the brush and soften. There we go. Okay, same thing on the other side. Kind of outline that edge, but then bring it in fatter right above the rim. Kind of rounding it. And just carefully soften that inside edge. Barely touch. I'm going to go under the rim. And let that kind of blend in. A little thicker, tapering it on each side. It helps to round the bell out a little better. And catch that edge. Now I certainly could have floated this on with a corner load on a brush, and if you're used to doing that, you certainly can do that. You also can use the extender in your flatter angle brushes when you're floating, so that it just gives you a little bit more time to blend. But you can see this, because of my environment, I'm not having to go ahead and moisten this surface first. It's working just fine as it is. And I think I'm going to leave that. Well, you know what? I want just a little hairline across the top of that rim. Just to let that stand out. But I'm going to catch that outline with my brush so that it's not so bold. And clean my brush. Okay. I'm going to deepen some of this with burnt sienna. So some of the same areas I just did with the Yellow Deep. Extender in both ends of the brush. Wipe them on the towel. And it doesn't take much of that burnt sienna. It's a strong color, so just a dab of extender in there. Can use it a little bit more transparent for this. Okay, so now I'm just going to go to the extreme areas. So like just the corners here. And soften. And I'll do the corners above as well. Not doing as much as I did with the first color. You do less and less with each step. And one more. And soften. Okay, now another thing that you could do is if you wanted to brighten it a little bit more, you could even use, like Hansa yellow, either medium or light, or just somewhere in between, and put a little, I'm going to put just a dab, I think, on the rim of the bell this time. So a little bit of a brighter yellow. I'm going to put it right, and it's transparent, so it's going to blend in real nice. Just soften it in. I don't think I'm even going to need to use my blending brush for that. So if you wanted to, if you felt like you wanted to perk it up just a touch, maybe a little on the top too. There we go. Okay. For the bottom, where the little holes are, I'm going to use just a script brush, and I really like the black gold, either a 10-aught or 20-aught for doing my lines and outlining. For the bell itself, you're going to take the wooden end and dip it in black. So the wooden end, dip it in black, and I'm going to make 2 holes. Now remember, each time you dip it, it gets a little, or touch it, it gets smaller. So I gave it a little rotation so I wouldn't have to re-dip it again. Then you can take that wet paint. Yep, I just need to make sure I have it some on my brush too. Take that wet paint and kind of curve it like an X for the opening of the bell. And that's all you need to do for that part. Okay, now I'm ready for the lettering. I went ahead and traced it on so that it'll be all set to go here. I blow dried everything good. And this time for the bottom letters, I'm actually going to use the Faux Squirrel Rigger. Now, the rigger is like a liner. However, when you take a close look, when you spread those bristles out at the tip, they're flat, and it makes it much easier for certain styles of lettering to be able to have it, to be able to spread it out and make it flat as opposed to a point. So that's why I chose this. I actually do use the liner for the skinny lettering up on top, but for the Santa, number 2 rigger works great. They come in all different sizes, so depending on how big of a piece you're working on, it's nice to have a variety. Okay, so I'm done with the extender now. Just using water if I need to loosen it, and I've got this pretty 24 karat gold extreme sheen. Okay, so I want all the letters to be kind of uniform. So I'm going to use a lot of paint, and I stop and start. I can't always go all the way through, but that's okay. So it's because I want it nice and thick. So to start with, I'm just going to go ahead and get all the letters filled in. And it's like the width of the brush, so if you need 2 coats, you can, but I try to do it thick enough where I'm only going to need 1 coat. So let's go ahead and get all the letters in. Okay, so there's the Santa letters. I'm going to let those dry just a little bit before I put the stars on them. So I'm going to go ahead and switch and do the I believe in letters next. I'm going back to my script liner, and I'm going to use the medium white instead of the brightest white for that. I want to loosen it up, and these are just thin little letters. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do all the main lines and then come back and add the little details to some of the tips and edges. Okay, now I want to add just some extra little details to some of the basic shapes. So adding lines or circles or whatever you want to do to kind of decorate it up a little bit, make it a little more interesting. You can have like a curve come off the tops of the letters. Okay, there we go. All right, let's see if I can get my stars on the bottom. And there again, I'm just going to use the stylus just like I did the gold stars. Up in the sky, I'll do little white ones on top of the letters. So up, side to side, and down. And you'll find that the white is a little bit easier to do than the gold, and that's just because the gold is so transparent. Okay, and then it's just adding more dots throughout the background with the metallic gold. There, kind of hard to know when to quit because it's just fun doing some of that stuff. So there we have it. I believe in Santa. So I hope you enjoyed watching this. Please be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Jillybean Fitzhenry, or also subscribe or subscribe to Dynasty Brush YouTube channel. Give me a like and leave a comment. I really appreciate you watching. Hope that this has inspired you to give it a try. Thank you.